Welcome back, welcome back. Another live stream where we cover the rules for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Until, of course, we wind up covering the rules for Dungeons & Dragons, or 1D&D, or Dungeons & Dragons 6th Ed Edition in a few years. But for now, we are dealing with 5e, and that is the topic for today. Now, for those of you who have not been part of this particular live stream, this particular one is where I cover the basics of the game. And then obviously I will open it up to a Q&A or questions and answers like I normally do. And then once I've done the open it up to Q&A, I will answer what questions and respond to people in the chat. And then I will, of course, demonstrate as much as I possibly can about what I've just spoken about today. There are 4 of these in the whole series. This is your opportunity to ask questions that you have about the rules, and particularly if you are from, don't speak English, I'm hoping that the demonstration aspect will make it a lot easier for you. But in any case, even if I don't cover the things that you want to talk about, you can ask them in the chat. All right, so let's just go over to make sure my face is actually going to come up today. I'm going to suggest to everybody that I will do my slideshow first. I will open up to Q&A, we'll do some demonstration, and then we'll sign out and we're done for today, and we'll come back next week. Okay, so that is the intention. This is how I want to run it. And it looks like we're all pretty much good and ready to go. So I'm pretty happy with that. Looks like everything is running correctly. Good news, good news. You'll let me know if things aren't. Okay. Signing over. Let's go. Whoops. There we go. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons because I usually do. And no, it's not the topic. Chess is not coming into it. I'm just poking fun, okay? Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules. This is Lesson 1, Basic Game Mechanics. This is where I cover just the absolute basics of the game for those of you who need that. The overview for today, what will I cover? I'm going to cover the creature ability scores, that is the monsters and the player characters. Ability checks, what they are for and how to make them. Skill checks, what they are for and how to make them. Saving throws, attack rolls. We're going to talk about DC or difficulty class, what a contest is, how to perform those, what is AC and how to deal with AC. And then, of course, the final mechanic I want to talk about is advantage and disadvantage and how that works in your game. The objectives for today are, I'm going to explain everything, all the dice mechanics that you have just heard me talk about. I'm going to cover all of them. I'll explain them very carefully. I will demonstrate as much as I possibly can, and I want you to participate. I want you to be part of this, so please feel free to ask me questions because chances are I will respond. More than likely, this is why this class exists in the first place, so you can ask a question. Now, D&D Beyond has the basic game mechanics for Dungeons & Dragons 5e for free available. You can go and access it. You can also get a PDF from it as well. So yeah, go check it out. You don't have to pay a cent. You can play this game without having to spend money. Right, the first thing we need to discuss is creature ability scores. What's the deal with this? Well, creature ability scores. There are 6 abilities providing a quick description of every creature's physical and mental characteristics. And the whole game mechanics are based on the ability scores when you're trying to do anything. The first one is strength. This measures physical power, a character's ability to crush, say, a tomato in their hand. This is the analogy I'm going to use, people. I'm going to use tomato as my analogy. If you haven't figured it out, it's probably the simplest way to understand the whole thing. So, crush tomato, that's strength. Dexterity measures your agility, how quick you are. This would be a character's ability to avoid being hit by a tomato if somebody threw that tomato at them. Constitution will measure your endurance, how long you can keep doing something. How you can resist some sort of effect. So this would be a character's ability to eat a rotten tomato and not get sick. Okay, you have a high constitution if you don't get sick. Intelligence measures reasoning and memory, not how smart you are, reasoning and memory. This would be a character's ability to know that a tomato is a fruit and not a vegetable. Wisdom measures perception and insight, and this is a character's ability to understand that a tomato doesn't go into the fruit salad. Charisma, this measures force of personality, and this is going to basically be a character's ability to sell that rotten tomato to a customer and for the customer to be happy with their purchase. Okay, so what are the core Dungeons & Dragons 5e dice mechanics involved in the game? There's quite a few, but they all follow a very similar pattern, so you don't need to freak out too much with regard to them. Now, how do you go about making an ability check? It's probably our fundamental thing that we need to discuss. Like how does that actually look? Well, there's one formula to the whole thing to keep it really simple for you. An ability check. An ability check allows an action to be taken that has a chance of failure. So if the monsters or the NPCs or even the player characters are trying to do something and there's a chance of failure, then we'll use this. And you're going to refer to page 174 of the player's handbook for ability checks. The ability check is a test basically of the character's or monster's effort to overcome that challenge or some sort of threat. And there are 6 ability checks available, and that is the strength, dexterity, intelligence, constitution, wisdom, and charisma. These are the most important mechanics in the game, and they fill in all the gaps when you are unsure what to do. Now, how do you go about making an ability check? Very simple. It is the result of adding your ability modifier to a 20-sided dice roll, and then the end result is your ability check. That score, that number, when you add those two numbers together. Very simple, not hard to understand. Skills are an extension of the ability check. For those of you who have never heard of these before, that's all right. They are linked to the different abilities. So if you are familiar with those different abilities, you'll find that all the skills are linked in some way to them. Skill checks are essentially a specialized ability check that allows an action that also has a chance of failure to take place. Okay? But skills often include training, where you are trained, skilled, proficient in that in some way, hence the word skill. Not everybody has a particular skill and is well trained in it though. And it's the best way to sort of get your head around this is probably to look to page 174 of the player's handbook, where it specifies pretty much everything. The skill check is a test of a character or a monster's specific aspect of an ability, and in some way of overcoming a challenge. There are 18 different skills. The different skills are athletics, acrobatics, sleight of hand, stealth, arcana. So many here. Arcana, deception, history, insight, intimidation, investigation, and it doesn't finish there because there's a second list as well. Medicine, nature, perception, performance, persuasion, religion, sleight of hand, stealth, and survival. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? What does that mean ultimately in the end? Like, okay, it's all very well, you've told me this, Fred, but I don't understand. What are they actually supposed to do? Well, a lot of the time you'll find the skills actually marry up with what they are sort of supposed to do. So athletics would be your ability to lift something heavy or to do something athletic like jumping or running. That's what athletics is about. Acrobatics is more something where you are doing, say, some gymnastics, a somersault, tumbling, having to walk like a tightrope. That would be a good example of using acrobatics. Sleight of hand is when you're trying to very carefully steal something out of somebody's pocket. If you want to steal some money, sleight of hand might also be involved in doing something very delicate. So you could use sleight of hand if you're trying to move your hand through a tight gap and without disturbing some sensors or without disturbing a trap. Sleight of hand might be appropriate in this situation. Stealth is exactly what it sounds like. Stealth is your ability to be sneaky and be hidden and not be heard and get around somebody without them detecting you. Arcana is basically measuring your understanding of how magic works. Like, do you understand and do you know how to use magic? It's not so much about casting spells, it's more about that. And then something like history. This is your knowledge of different historical events that have taken place throughout your adventuring life. Investigation. Investigation is more around things like, are you good at being like Sherlock Holmes? Can you deduct, take a clue and figure out the end result, what actually happened here? Nature is your knowledge of flora and fauna and just nature in general. Religion would be your understanding of different gods and goddesses, deities, religious sects, stuff like that, outside of your own. Animal handling is your ability to ride a horse, feed an animal without it eating your hand. Insight would be your ability to figure out what the motives are or pick up on body language that a monster or a human or a creature is presenting to you, potentially when they are lying, but not always. Medicine is sort of like your forensic skills. You know, how can you figure out, how did this person die? We found a corpse, how did they die? Perception, this is sort of your senses, like how easy is it for you to notice something or detect something, whether with your eyes, your ears, your nose, or through taste, potentially, or through touch. So that's perception. Survival is exactly what it sounds like, your ability to survive in the wild. You know, do you know which way is north? Can you follow the stars or the sun? Do you know where you're going? Do you know how to forage for food? Things like that. Deception is your ability to trick somebody into doing something that you want them to do, or trick them into thinking that you are somebody you are not. So often this would be involving a disguise of some kind. Intimidation is your ability to stand over somebody and scare the bejesus out of them, basically. Performance is your ability to maybe put on a dance, sing a song, do some sort of magical act, and put on a show and entertain people. Or even play a musical instrument. And then persuasion is your ability to convince somebody that doing something is a good idea or to agree with you. Now, this is not deception, okay? It is just you're trying to influence them by a good argument, if anything else. Okay, so that is the different skills with regard to Dungeons & Dragons 5e, but how do they look in terms of when we have to make one? Well, you will have noticed already that the mechanics behind it seem very similar to what we've just seen before with the ability check. Now, you'll find that some skills have a modifier, and it will be calculated differently. So when you get a skill modifier, there's two ways it's going to be calculated. One, it will be your ability modifier related to that skill, plus your proficiency bonus if that character is trained or proficient in the skill. Otherwise, your skill modifier is simply your ability modifier if you're not trained or skilled or proficient in that skill. Skill checks are easy to figure out. You simply add your skill modifier once you know what it is to a 20-sided dice roll and you get your skill check result. Piece of cake, nice and easy. There's another type of mechanic in the game. Probably one of the more confusing ones to understand, and I'm going to go through them. And you'll notice that they bear a lot of resemblance to the ability check. They sort of line up quite nicely. A saving throw dice mechanic is basically there for indicating when you are trying to, or your monsters are trying to resist a spell, maybe a trap effect, or a poison, or a disease, or a hazard, or some sort of harmful force. You'll find all the information on saving throw DCs and difficulty classes and saving throw mechanics. They're all really there on page 179 of the Player's Handbook. 179. The saving throw is an automatic and forced attempt to resist a threat, where the character or monster doesn't have a choice. Like it is just something that you just do. Okay. I know a lot of people like, can I decide to fail that saving throw? No, not really. It's like, if I drink poison, can I decide that I die from it or I get sick from it? No, you don't. Your body will do what it's going to do. So you don't actually have a choice about how the saving throw works ultimately. Now, there is room, of course, for a dungeon master to make a ruling on this, but ultimately it's a forced thing. There are 6 saving throws related to the abilities. There is the strength saving throw, the dexterity saving throw, the intelligence saving throw, the constitution saving throw, the wisdom saving throw, and the charisma saving throw. There's a few here. So now that we know what they are, what do they actually do? I mean, that's the real question. Is, I mean, even if we look at this and say, okay, we've got 6 saving throws, how do they actually work in the game? Well, strength saving throw, this would be something like stopping being pushed by a strong wind. You would use a strength saving throw maybe in this situation. A dexterity saving throw to avoid being hit by a rolling boulder trap. Say if you're Indiana Jones and you've got this boulder rolling towards you that could potentially squash you, and you can dodge out of the way, well, a dexterity saving throw would be the thing to use. A constitution saving throw would be to resist, say, poison laced in a drink. I just talked about that before. Intelligence saving throws is maybe disbelieving an illusion created by magic. A wisdom saving throw is your ability to resist being charmed by a mermaid. So a mermaid shows up, sings a beautiful song, and makes itself available, and can you resist their charms? Essentially, that's what it's about. And there's a magical effect to the mermaid in some respects. Sometimes it's not, but often you'll find a lot of these things with saving throws have some very strong magical effect taking place. Something that you can't just sort of shake off easily without making a dice roll. The charisma saving throw is something where you would be avoiding being possessed by a ghost. So a ghost tries to enter your body, take over control, and you would make a charisma saving throw. Some saving throw modifiers will be calculated different ways, but essentially the saving throw modifier is calculated this way. It's your ability modifier plus your proficiency bonus if the character is trained or proficient in that saving throw. If you're not trained or proficient in that saving throw, it is just your ability modifier. Nice and simple. Okay, so we know all the bits and pieces around that, but actually how do we go about making a saving throw? Good news for you. Much like all the other dice rolls I've been talking about, the formula is pretty much the same. You make a saving throw this way. You take your saving throw modifier and you add it to a 20-sided dice roll, and the end result is the saving throw check. Okay? Done. You're done. Easy peasy. It's nice and simple. Right. You've got to be probably engaging in battle at some point. That means creatures are going to have to make attack rolls. What does an attack roll actually look like? How do they work in the game? So attack rolls are your ability to hit a creature in combat. That's what a attack roll is. And you'll find the information on them on page 193 to 195 of the player's handbook. An attack roll represents the characters or the monsters or NPCs attempt to hit successfully with significant force to reduce the hit points of the target. Now they could use a ranged weapon, they could use close quarter weapons such as a mace or a sword, they could use a ranged spell, they could use a melee spell which is up close, they might use an unarmed strike or punch or kick them, it might be a monster that uses claws or teeth or some sort of natural body part. All of those things come into play. Now it's important to understand that it is possible to hit a creature and not actually do any damage. Okay? That essentially represents you missing. But ultimately, the attack roll, when it is successful, represents you hitting the target, but hitting it with enough force that it actually reduces its hit points. Doesn't mean that it suffers an injury. You've got to understand that Dungeons & Dragons uses a lot of abstract concepts in the game. So how do you calculate your attack roll? The attack roll modifier is relatively simple to understand. This is how it works. You calculate it by taking your ability modifier related to the type of attack you're making. So your ability modifier, and add your proficiency bonus if the character is trained or proficient in that type of attack. So if you are trained or skilled in the longsword, then you would add your proficiency bonus to your strength modifier, okay, because you use strength with close quarter weapons usually. And then with a ranged attack like a bow, okay, you would take your dexterity modifier and add your proficiency bonus if you are trained and skilled in the bow. Okay, what happens if you're not proficient? Well, you can still make an attack, but you would only be using your ability modifier and you would not have proficiency in it. For anybody who's going to ask me right now, every character is always proficient in unarmed strikes. Okay, every character and monster is proficient in unarmed strikes. Okay, it's not that complicated. All right, next, how do we actually calculate our attack roll? Again, nice and simple, same sort of formula as we've been using before. An attack roll is the result of adding your attack modifier, whatever that is, to a 20-sided dice roll. And the end result is the attack roll. And then when you take that number and we're going to compare that number with the armor class, which I'll talk about very shortly. But there are a couple other things we need to discuss before we get onto that. And so I want to move on to them first and break them down for you. The first one is the difficulty class, or DC. The easiest way to understand difficulty class, or DC, is ability checks or skill checks and even a saving throw are going to use a difficulty class, or DC. This is where you compare the ability check, the skill check, or the saving throw to the DC or difficulty class. Any ability or skill check or saving throw that is equal to or greater than the DC, okay, that is set, is successful. Okay, if you get less than the DC, you fail. So you need to get equal to or greater than to be successful. Less than, you fail. Typical difficulty classes in Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and probably the standard you should stick to, is 5 is very easy, probably a waste of your time to actually do. 10 is easy, probably again very pointless doing it. 15 is a medium difficulty, and then 20 is hard, 25 is very hard, and 30 is near impossible. There is another way that we can resolve dice rolls other than using a difficulty class. And this is probably the most complicated system out there out of all of the ones I'm going to present today. And that is a contest. Ability checks and skill checks can also be resolved, but not saving throws. But ability and skill checks can be resolved by using a contest. In some situations, it would be appropriate. And what you would do is you would take the two different ability or skill checks being used between, say, the player characters and the monster, and success is achieved when you get greater than the other person's check or the other monster's check. Okay? Very, very simple. So an example of how a contest might work is, say, you're having an arm wrestle with a minotaur in an inn, and you make a athletics or strength check to do this. And you make your check, you get your number, and then the minotaur does the same thing. That'll be the dungeon master doing this, and they get their check. Whoever gets the highest succeeds in winning the arm wrestle and knocks the other person's hand down to the ground. If the result is equal, then no change occurs. Okay, it's a standoff, it's a stalemate. If you get less, you are obviously it's a failure for you, and whoever's performing this contest with you will win over you. So that's the simplest way to understand how that works. Now, a dice mechanic you will use a lot, and that is armor class. Armor class comes into Dungeons & Dragons 5e and Dungeons & Dragons full stop quite a lot. This is where you take the attack roll and you compare your attack roll to the target or creature's armor class or AC. Any attack roll that is equal to or greater than the target's armor class is a hit. And if you get less than the armor class of the monster or creature or the character, then if you get less, you miss. It's really simple. So greater than and equal to, you hit and you are successful in striking them. And if you get less than, you miss. When an attack roll hits, you roll the appropriate damage for the attack and apply any special modifiers. Now, what does all of this mean ultimately in the end? It means that you have essentially 4 different dice mechanics and 3 ways of resolving them. Okay? One being DC, one being contest, and another one being armor class. But ultimately, in the end, the mechanics are almost identical no matter what you're using. There is one other mechanic that we need to talk about because it affects how many dice you roll and how the game will look when you make essentially a 20-sided dice roll or a D20 test. Let's call it a D20 test. The advantage dice mechanic works like this. When you are required to make a 20-sided dice roll, in some cases you will have advantage. Either that is given to you by some of the features that your monster or your character has, or your dungeon master gives you advantage for whatever reason. There can be many different reasons. You're going to roll two 20-sided dice and use the highest of the two rolls. That is what advantage means. Okay, that's what you would use for your ability check, your skill check, your saving throw, or your attack roll. Okay, that's advantage. Disadvantage is the exact opposite of that. This is where we have a d20 dice roll that takes place, and we're going to roll two dice, and we're going to take the lowest result. Okay, so you roll two 20-sided dice, use the lower of the two rolls if you have disadvantage on your ability check, your saving throw, your attack roll, or your skill check. Now, some features apply disadvantage. Sometimes your dungeon master will assign disadvantage to your character or even to another monster that they are controlling. There's many different ways that can occur. Ultimately, in the end, the mechanics are relatively the same when it comes to the core game. Now, I always give out miscellaneous recommendations when I do this, and this is my recommendation to you. If you are unsure what to do with a game mechanic, then just have the character roll a 20-sided dice and then add whatever they get on the 20-sided dice to any of these modifiers. An ability modifier. Just use the ability modifier. If you're ever unsure what to do, just take the 20-sided dice roll, select the ability modifier or ability that you think relates to what they're trying to do in terms of the action they're trying to take with the creature or character, and that's how they perform the action. Simplest and easiest way to understand how to get through a lot of the other stuff. There will not be a mechanic for everything in the game. You're playing Dungeons and Dragons where players and monsters can try to do anything, and so you can't possibly cover every single role there is, because that would be crazy. I'm hoping this was useful to you. If it was, fantastic. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions or any feedback. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, I'm not gone. But we'll, for those of you who are wondering, is there going to be demonstration? Yeah, of course there is. That's the whole point. So yes, there is. But I also want to deal with questions. And even if I don't have too many questions, I am definitely going to do a lot of demonstration today. So don't think that I won't. I will be taking a break at the 1 hour mark, by the way. Right, so let's go back to my face for now. And we'll go through the chat very quickly, and then I'll do some demonstration. Hello, how are you doing, Nacho? Nacho Man is a patron and supports me on Patreon. In fact, that's the best way to support the programs that I do. This particular program that I run has 4 parts where we do basics, mechanics, we do basic combat, complex combat, and then magic mechanics. And I run this every week, and so I just roll over and we do those 4 classes in a cycle that just continues on. So the best way to support me to make sure I keep doing it is on Patreon, where you pay you can pay as little as $1 a month, you get everything, and it helps me, it keeps things moving. Otherwise, super chats and super stickers are always welcome. Please ask your questions, feel free to do so. Dungeons and Chronics, hello, how are you doing? Ed Urban, hello Ed Urban, how are you? Beginner DM, how and what do you roll for Sacred Flame for a Goblin Shaman against a player? Okay, so hang on. So you are casting Sacred Flame on with your Goblin Shaman against a player's character. Okay, I think we can sort that out for you. I wonder if I've got it sitting in my little collection of spells here. Sacred Flame. I may not have Sacred Flame easily available on a card. I was hoping I did, but then I probably don't. You never know with these things. Okay. All right. So I think what we'll do, Ed, is we're going to take us over to D&D Beyond. And over at D&D Beyond, I will go over the spell with you, and then I will demonstrate that spell for you. Does that make sense? I think that's probably the smartest way to deal with this. So where are we? Sources, spells, there we go. Type in that. Sacred Flame. Come on, baby. Come on. You can do it. Yep. Sacred Flame. And if I move that over to there, and I shift this over, I pull that up. Where is my pen? Sacred Flame. Okay. There we go. I am pretty much ready to go. So I will just flick us over to there, and then we'll be ready to actually do this. Now, you said from your goblin, so I will take away all the hobgoblins, and I'll put in some goblins instead. How's that sound? I think that's probably the easiest way. Put some goblins in there. We've got a goblin shaman. There we go. Goblins. Goblins are everywhere. Okay. Bam. So let's make sure that screen is ready to go. It is, and we want to go over to Sacred Flame, and it's ready to go. Oh, that's good. Easy peasies. That was nice. I like that. It's good when it works that way. All right. So looking at Sacred Flame, this is basically how Sacred Flame is going to work with your goblin when you're casting it. Okay. And it is a cantrip, so you get to cast it as many times as you like. Good. It's an action. It has a range of 60 feet, so you have to make sure that your spell, when you target somebody, is within 60 feet. Okay. Then, and that's essentially, if you look at it, each square is usually worth 5 feet, so that means 30 feet would be 6 squares, so you're looking at 12 squares if you're using a grid for 60 feet. It's instantaneous, and there's a dexterity saving throw involved. That means that whatever they're going to do, they have to make a dexterity saving throw to avoid it affecting them. The spell works like this. Flame-like radiance descends on a creature from above, and you have to be able to see them. If you can't see them, they have to be in range, and they make the dexterity saving throw, and they're going to take an 8-sided dice worth of damage. Okay, it's at lowest level. It can go higher than that, but at its lowest level, you would definitely be doing it like that. Okay, so I'm going to use it and consider this at its lowest level rather than at its highest level, which we would do some other time. So that's the spell, and of course it can be cast at higher levels depending on how higher level your goblin shaman is. So if they are level 5, then you can say, okay, well, they cast with 2 8-sided dice. Don't add any modifier. It's just the dice. It's a cantrip. It's really simple. Okay, if your goblin is level 11, then it would be 38. So 3d8, and then if you're level 17 goblin shaman, wow, then you get 4d8. Okay, right. So this is kind of the reverse of what I normally get to demonstrate. So this is going to be fun. I get to see if I can hurt one of the player characters. Let's make that happen today, shall we? So here we are. This is our situation. These here are our goblins. This is your goblin shaman right here. These are our player characters. I am going to use Sacred Flame on this target right here. Okay, this is the fighter in the front. That makes it a little bit easier for me, just because I kind of know what the numbers are for that. Now the DC, I'm going to assume that this is a very low level goblin shaman, so it probably has a DC of 13. I've already explained how to calculate that. So DC equals 13. So we need to make a dexterity saving throw to see if we take any damage. Now, what you're going to do is you get the player character to tell you what their dexterity saving throw is. I'm going to use the fighter noble from the player's handbook, not the player's handbook, from the starter set for Lost Mine of Phandelver. Okay, and the saving throw for that character is a -1 dexterity check. So -1. Okay, it's not very good at all. So I ask the player who has the fighter that having the spell targeted on them. This is the one that's being targeted, that fighter. Roll a dice. I'm in range. That's 60 feet. So I rolled a 4. 4 is not very much, but doesn't matter because it's good for our demonstration. 4 minus 1 is 3. 3 is less than, okay, the DC, which is 13. So our fighter fails the check. With Sacred Flame, there is no, you don't do any damage if they succeed. But if they fail, they do take damage. So you roll an 8-sided dice, and I rolled a 2. So that means that the fighter will take 2 damage from Sacred Flame. And they are now feeling slightly off-put. And then we'll probably rush the goblins and kill them with their great axe. But that's basically how Sacred Flame works. Yep. All right. That's that one sorted out. That was nice and easy. Moving on. Ed, you'll let me know if that answers your question. I think it does pretty clearly. Okay, Nacho, what have you got here? I always get confused with spell ranges and areas. Do you think a spell templates are a good tool for a dungeon master? Funny you should say that. I do actually have a template with me right now. So I will show you the template. It might be a little bit hard for it to show up on screen. I'll do my very best to sort of indicate what's going on here. Yes, I do think they are very helpful. So by all means, if you can grab one, otherwise you can make them. I've made templates myself. It's cheap. You can use cardboard, you can use plastic. You just mark it out and then cut it out with some paper and you're done. Okay? Nice and simple. Right, so this here, I don't know if you can actually buy this thing. This is called the CZYY. I don't know exactly what the heck the company's thinking when they give themselves a name like this, but this is basically what it's called. Okay, and it's a template. It's clear and see-through. You'll notice, if I put it over the wider section, that there are some different templates marked on here. So the circles represent the spheres that you can get. So I can do this. The whole thing represents a 20-foot radius. So if I want to use this for fireball, I can lay this down and fireball an area. The next one is marked out at, oh, can I see this thing? 15. 15 is there. 10 is here. And then 5 is here. Okay, so that sort of gives you an idea. And it does have a little marker, so you can use it if you're centering it on a particular center of a miniature. You can sort of use that black mark there to help you with that. So that sort of does your radiuses. If you're using like a cube, there is, if you can, I don't know if you can tell, but there are a couple of different cubes on here. There is the 10-foot cube, which is the first square in here, and then there is the 20-foot cube. You can get smaller cubes. I wouldn't say that this necessarily is the best template I've ever seen on the market, but they did send it to me because I requested them to send it to me because I knew I would use it quite a lot in this sort of thing. And then you also have another one, which is a cone. This only gives you a 15-foot cone. Right here, you can see it's marked out in the dotted line, and it's marked 15-foot cone. It would be good if you have a template that is also marked out for a 10-foot cone. There's no point having a cone of 5 foot because, frankly, I don't think there is such a thing. But yeah, you can get cones that are larger than 15 foot, and so all you need to do, if you ever find that you are dealing with a cone that is larger than 15 foot with this particular template, is simply extend along the lines. I usually use a pen or a pencil, and that gives me a better idea, and then I can figure out where to position things. That's only if you're using a grid. If you're using theatre of the mind, who gives a shit? I mean, it doesn't matter. You just figure it out and say, okay, this is how it's going to work. Now, I know players don't like that sort of thing, but when you're dealing with theatre of the mind and you're not using a grid, like, you kind of have to do that. You just have to just do the best you can. Yep. So that's the template concept. Since you were asking, there it is. Okay, so what do you got here, Nacho? Also, do you have an easy way of working out the challenge rating for building encounters? No. Yes and no. Okay. All right. John, I'll get to your question, so do hang around. I'm going to answer Nacho's question. Right. Here's my answer to you. Challenge rating is not actually very accurate in Dungeons and Dragons 5e. It's not a secret, okay? I can assure you, everybody knows this. Everybody knows that it's more of a guide, and it's a very rough guide. There are too many things and elements involved to use challenge rating to determine whether a monster is suitable for your group. One, because your groups can be different sizes. Yes, there is formulas that's sort of supposed to help you with that, but you've got to understand that the formula doesn't work if you have less than 4 or 5 players, and it doesn't work if you have more than 6 players. So, I mean, suddenly that doesn't come into play. It doesn't take into consideration all of the new supplements and subclasses that are brought into the game. Between level 1 and 5, you'll find the challenge rating is probably at its strongest. And after that, it's completely a waste of your time. After challenge rating 5, all of that means nothing. Okay? I have seen level 5 or 6 characters dispose of a challenge rating 20 monster in one round. It can happen. Okay? It does happen. So as a result of that, you have to look at how to figure out your monsters. There are formulas, there are encounter builders out there. I know people swear by them and love them and so forth. I have one approach. You've got to understand that it's more of an art rather than a science. And previous versions of the game, such as Dungeons and Dragons 4e, had the same problem. You had monster level, and even 3.5 and version 3 still had the same problem. Now, the reason the problem exists is because Wizards of the Coast has tried to sell the market the concept that you can actually create a mathematical equation that explains the best monster to use for your group and their level. It's been a fallacy that they've been trying to sell for years. Why are they trying to sell that concept to you? Because people have insisted that it can be done. Okay, people have insisted that it can be done. It's like insisting that cold fusion is a possibility, and yet nobody seems to be able to do it consistently. Yeah? Right. So, here is my advice to you. I want you to treat your player characters like frogs and your encounter like a pot of cold water that you put on a stove. And you turn up the heat. Now, as the heat increases, the frogs will find this little bath they're currently having, your player characters who are in this hot water that you're slowly turning up. So you start easy and you get harder and harder and harder until you get to a point where the heat is so much that your froggies or player characters jump out of the pot. Then you know you've made it significantly hard enough that it's a challenge for them. So trial and error, start low, make it easy, make the encounters harder and harder and harder. Yes, they will level up over time, so you will have to adjust this. That is the best way to deal with encounter creation, frankly. Anything else is going to be a waste of your time, and you'll get frustrated. Okay? All right. So that's my answer to that one. Now, John had a question. Hello, Kyle Armstrong. How are you? I'm aware of how Sly Flourish calculates deadly encounters, but I can assure you that there really isn't a calculation you can do. I have seen it. I'm aware of it. And it's not like Mike isn't an experienced dungeon master. He's probably more respected than certainly and more well known than I am. Okay, John, I'm a bit confused about short rests and healing. How does it work when a player wants to heal in short rests? And can he heal every time there is a short rest? Okay, fair enough, John. So what we'll do is, because your question is related to the short rest, I will pull up the player's handbook on D&D Beyond, and I will go to the short rest, and I will talk directly to the short rest mechanic. How's that sound? I think that's probably the best way to go, so that I can I'll work my way through your question and answer your questions as best I can. All right, let's do that. Let's go, where are we? Window capture. Oh, I'm in the wrong place now, so I have to move my little, no, that's not the right one. There we go. scuttle myself over to that side. Just bear with me. Okay, there we go. The short rest. So this is how it works. A short rest is a period of downtime. It is at least 1 hour, so it has to be an hour or more, and during which your character does nothing. It can't be doing anything strenuous, okay? It can eat, they can drink, they could read a book, they can tend to their wounds, okay? They could cook a meal, okay? As long as they're not trying to cook a meal for 100 people, yeah? A character can spend 1 or more of their hit dice. So I think what you're trying to do is trying to figure out how to use hit dice in your game at the end of a short rest. So once they complete that 1 hour at least of the short rest, they get to use their hit dice. And they can use how many? Up to their character's maximum number of hit dice. So when your character is level 1, okay, they have 1 hit dice. And it can be up to the level of their character, basically. So if they're level 5, they would have 5 hit dice they can spend. If they are level 10, they have 10 hit dice they can spend during a short rest. Now, for each hit die spent in this way, the player rolls the dice or die and adds their character's constitution modifier to it. The character regains hit points equal to the total, and they can never get less than 0, so you can't go into minuses, okay? The character can then decide to spend an additional hit dice after each roll. So the best way, and I always encourage players to do this, and that is to roll 1 of their hit dice, see what they get, and decide if they need to spend any more. They don't need to take another short rest. They just get to spend them until they have used up as many as they need to, as long as they haven't expended all of them, and then they are finished. Okay? A character regains some spent hit dice finishing a long rest, which is different to a short rest. The long rest is 8 hours, okay? So how many do they regain on a long rest? Well, they regain half their hit dice, which is really confusing because at level 1, half is like, how do you get half of a hit dice? Doesn't really seem to make sense. So that means that when you regain them, you can only get, you have to get at least 1 hit dice back. So at level 1, you're going to get 1. At level 2, you're still going to only get 1 because you only get half your hit dice back. At level 3, okay, we have to halve that, but we don't round up, we round down. So at level 3, when they take a long rest, they only get 1 of their hit dice back because they should be getting 1.5 hit dice back, but we can't have a 0.5. So because we're having to round down, but we can't, it's really weird, okay? At level 4, they're going to get 2 hit dice back on a long rest. At level 5, they're still going to get 2 back, okay? Because you can't have 2.5. Right, so that's how the regaining of hit points, our hit dice works. Now, how do you spend them is a little different. And I think probably the easiest way to explain that is using the battle map and some pages. So I'm going to shift a few things around for this situation and show you essentially on a character sheet what this looks like. It's probably the easiest way to actually demonstrate this, and I'll use some dice, okay, and we'll demonstrate the process to you. Right, so I'm going to use the fighter. I was using the fighter before. This is the same fighter from the Dungeons & Dragons starter set for the Lost Mine of Phandelver. This is the noble character, and at level 1 they have a 10-sided dice as their hit dice. So that's the dice that we would be rolling when we want to use it. Okay, so where the heck is that 10-sided dice? I can't find it. It's 12. There. Oh, that'll have to do. It's that one there. I'll just use that one. It's not quite the right one, but that'll do. Okay, so regaining hit points. Spend hit dice. Now, the constitution modifier for our fighter in this situation is a +2. So it's 2 plus whatever we roll on their dice. That's what they're going to get back. Okay, let's scroll back over to that screen so you can see what I'm doing. So I know this is the percentile dice, people, but for some reason I can't figure out where the heck it is. My eyes just can't see it anywhere. So this is the dice I'm going to use, okay? Forget about the 0. 2 for our constitution modifier for our fighter who is going to take a short rest, and obviously not in the middle of this battle, but somewhere else, nice and quiet. And you roll that dice, and I got a 4. Okay, so 4, not 40, 4. Forget the 0. So they get 6 hit points back. Now they're only level 1, so they don't have any more hit dice left to use or spend. So they can't do anything more. That's all they get back. Okay. If they want to take, now if you have the character is say got multiple levels to them, then this is what it would look like. We're going to cross this out again. Forget about all the fact that this character is level 1. Just assume that it's now level 10. Okay, level 10. We have 10 of these things we could spend if we want. What you can do is you take your short rest and you roll your dice at the end of it to use your hit dice to regain hit points, and you get 2 plus whatever we roll here, which is a 7. Forget about the 0, just the 7 comes to 9. So they get 9 hit points back. But they just look, that's just not enough. I actually need more. I'm still hurt. I've still lost a few hit points, or I'm still fatigued, or whatever the heck you want to call it. So, well, let's do it again, because we've still got some more. We've only lost one of those. We've only used one. Okay, we could use another one. So 2 plus our modifier. So our modifier is 2, and we roll the dice again. And I get, this time I rolled that's actually a 1, not a 10. Okay, forget about the 0. Okay. That's going to be a bit confusing for people. I can see it now. All right, so this comes to 3. And like, well, that was just enough. I've had to use 2 of them. But if they still had lost hit points and they wanted to spend another one, they could. As long as they haven't used up all of their hit dice that they have available. They can use as many of their hit dice during a short rest as they like. They could use all 10 in one short rest. They could use 1. They could use half. They could use 2 of them. It really doesn't matter. How many short rests can they take during a day? They can take as many short rests as they can fit into a day. Okay, if there's 24 hours in a day, they could have a fight, take a short rest, regain some hit points using their hit dice, get into a fight, and then half an hour later they have to take another short rest. So they take another short rest for an hour and use more hit dice up, regain them. Look, they can do this quite a few different times. The only real restriction to taking the short rest is eventually you will run out of hit dice. Okay? Because even at level 20, you only get 20 hit dice. So even if there are 24 hours in the day, frankly, it doesn't matter, because ultimately they can only, if they're level 20, they can only do this, use 20 of these hit dice, okay? And they have to take a long rest, which is 8 hours before they get them all back. And that's really how the system works. Hopefully that answered your question and was clear enough. If it was, you'll let me know. Okay, all right. Back to the chat. Let's see where we are and how things are proceeding. I think we're all right. Yep. Okay, so Ugly Weirdo. Hello, Ugly Weirdo. Ugly Weirdo is, I'm pretty Ugly Weirdo's been, we were just chatting the other day on Discord, and I do have a Discord. I almost forgot. I do have a Discord. You can come over and just talk to me in person, people. Don't type anything in there. When I'm in the lounge, just come and talk to me in video chat or voice chat. I just don't have time to do the other stuff, unfortunately. I will post this in here, invite people. This will expire, this link, but you are welcome to come and chat with me. All for it. So let me just put this in here, post it. It is not just for patrons. Anybody is allowed to jump in and join into that, okay? I'm not restricting it in any way whatsoever. Now, I just need a drink of water and I'll continue with the questions. Oh, that's better. Man, I get dry. I've been talking so much recently, and so, trying to keep up with everything. Okay, but we're doing all right. We're getting through these questions. Pardon me, people. I'm just going to have to clear my throat a little bit. Actually, maybe I just put the lozenge in. That's going to be probably the biggest solution. Yeah, I think that's going to be a much better idea. Okay, right, back to our questions. Okay, Alec Armstrong. I like how Sly Flourish way of calculating deadly encounters. Add together all the character levels and divide by 2 if they're 5th level or above, and divide by 4 if they are level 1 to 4. Sure. If it works for you, great. Ugly Weirdo. Theatre of the Mind is great. My question is, how would you use Theatre of the Mind for online gaming? What do you mean? How would you use Theatre of the Mind for online gaming? Well, you just go Theatre of the Mind. You have a camera, and in terms of describing stuff, you just describe them as best you can. Exact position is really unimportant with Theatre of the Mind. I know a lot of players get really upset if they don't have exact position because they feel like they're going to cheat you and they aren't going to get the optimal position for their spell area. Look, I totally understand that. But if you're playing Theatre of the Mind, you've got to understand that the Dungeon Master can't calculate exactly everything perfectly. They're just going to kind of guess roughly how it's going to work. And, I mean, if you've been playing with your Dungeon Master long enough, hopefully you've developed enough trust with them that you are happy with their calls. If you don't like Theatre of the Mind, and I have a player who's like that, and still is in my group, and it usually always winds up being to their benefit when I'm running the game. Yeah, exact position just doesn't work. You just kind of guess things. It's a bit more nebula. I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, Ugly Weirdo, but I'm trying to. Park D. Hello, Park D. How are you? How often should opportunity attacks be used per battle? There's no such thing. Do any monsters out of the close combat count? Do any monsters out of close combat count? Well, if the monsters move out of melee range and the player character's can make an opportunity attack, yes, they should definitely do so. My PCs are quick and evading damage. So opportunity attacks. Okay. Opportunity attacks. Let's have a look at it. I guess I'll pull it up. And we'll just look at the rule. I think that's probably the easiest way to deal with it. I can't think of anything else other than that. I've never actually had somebody ask me a question like that before. Look, I'm not giving you a hard time or anything like that. I was a little bit surprised that this was a question people would have. So ultimately, your question is, how often should opportunity attacks occur? Well, opportunity attacks happen as many times as they would be provoked. So there's no limit. They can happen a lot, but they work a particular way. So let's have a talk about how they work, because it doesn't mean you can use opportunity attacks every single time, because it doesn't work that way. In a fight, everyone is constantly watching for a chance to strike the enemy, who is fleeing or passing by. Such an attack is called an opportunity attack. It used to be the old attack of opportunity for 3.5 and 4E, but now they call it an opportunity attack. Essentially the same thing. You can make an opportunity attack with a hostile creature that you can see that moves out of your reach. So you have to be able to see them. If you are blind in any way, or you don't have any kind of sight going on, or you can't see them, you can't do it. They have to move out of your reach. So if you have a 5-foot reach, that's when it would be provoked. To make the opportunity attack, you use your reaction, okay? A reaction takes place on somebody else's turn. It will be taking place on the monster's turn, or the Dungeon Master's turn in this case, and they can make one melee attack, okay, against the provoking creature. Now, when it says attack, I know a lot of people assume that you can only do that with a particular type of attack. Well, obviously it's got to be a melee attack. It can't be a ranged attack, okay? The attack occurs right before the creature leaves your reach. So Just as they move out of that and reach, the attack occurs. You can avoid provoking opportunity attacks by taking the disengage action. That's why that action exists. So if you take the disengage action and your monster moves, they can literally move their whole distance without provoking an attack of opportunity. Does that make sense? And when they do so, they can go right round the front line. I'm going to demonstrate this I think, on the board in a second, but let's keep talking about it. You also don't provoke an opportunity attack if you teleport. So if they use a teleportation ability like Dimension Door, Teleport, Misty Step is teleporting, or any other thing that does teleporting, you don't get an attack of opportunity. Okay, creature teleports, that's it, no attack of opportunity. Or there's a situation when someone or something moves you without using your movement, action, or reaction. So generally, say an explosion forcing you out of the reach or falling past a creature, like you don't have control over that. That's not your movement. Somebody doesn't get to make an attack of opportunity as you fall past them. Or if you are flung by an explosion in a direction. If you are dragged by something like Thorn Whip, the spell, past somebody out of their reach, they don't get to make an attack of opportunity on you because you are being dragged by force. It does not use your movement. The monster's movement is not being expended. Their action is not being expended, and their reaction is not being expended. The only reaction that's being expended is the creature who makes the opportunity attack. Okay, not the one that provokes. So that is the best way to sort of describe that. What I think might be useful to you in this case is to actually demonstrate with something like the Goblin, because the Goblin has a thing called Nimble Escape. Okay, and Nimble Escape is one of those times where things can get a little bit tricky because of the way that they work. So what I'll do is let me just move all this stuff out of the way. I will pull up my screen and I will show you what it would look like. That's probably the easiest way to deal with this. So no, that's the one I want. I want this. This is the screen. Okay, so let me reposition things really quickly, right? Let's assume that our little goblin army here are here, and the player characters make their way to here. Yep. And we've got various characters in various positions, and then we've got our wizard over here in the back line. Yep. Okay. Now, given that's our situation, opportunity attacks. This character here only gets to make an opportunity attack against the goblin when they actually leave his reach. His reach is only 5 foot. So if the goblin were to step back this way, then that means, okay, that the rogue here and the fighter and the cleric can make an opportunity attack against them if all they do is move directly away. Yep. Which is fine. I mean, that's how the game is designed to be. That's how it's supposed to work. That's all good. But, as I said, Nimble Escape allows a goblin to use a bonus action to take the disengage or hide action. Okay? So they can still make an attack, they can still do their disengage, and they can still move. So if it decides to use their Nimble Escape, the goblin can move out of reach and say, okay, I'm using Nimble Escape, disengaging, and I'm going to move back, and then I'll make attack. Okay? Or make an attack first and then move away. It's up to them. So they can now disengage because they're using their Nimble Escape. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Okay, I've moved well out of reach now. Okay, and you'll notice no attack. Goblin is fine because they can't. Yep. That's essentially how the concept works. But something like the goblin on their turn could do something terribly horrible to you, and it's called the Goblin Congo line. A little tip for those of you who are either having to fight goblins or are using goblins. If the goblin's turn comes around and it's their turn and they want to do something, the goblins could decide, actually, the wizard is our greatest threat, and we want to take out the wizard. So what you do is you use your bonus action with your goblin to disengage. Then you move to the over here to our wizard, and then you're going to make a scimitar attack, right? Wizards are usually got very low armor class. So we go nimble escape, disengage. 5, 10, 15. Now, when I did that, the cleric and the fighter don't get to attack because I'm disengaging and I am not. They can't attack me with an attack of opportunity. The whole move that I make, not just the first one, but the whole thing. So that I can do the same thing here with this one here. If I wanted to, I could go like, no. These guys are too well armored. I'm going to go round and take out the wizard. Okay, nimble escape, disengage. 5, 10, 15. And none of them, neither the rogue, the fighter, or the cleric, can make an attack on this goblin. Now and then I can make an attack on the wizard. Both of them can, and there's no attack of opportunity. I could do the same thing and decide, well, heck, if that one can do it, I can do it again. So we'll go disengage with our nimble escape. 5, 10, 15, 20. I went right round here and between here and no attack of opportunity because I'm a goblin. Nimble escape's pretty good. I want to go over here and do the same thing. So what I'll do is I'll go nimble escape, disengage, move. 5, 10, 15. I'm in there. So even if I walked past and I haven't actually moved out of reach of this this character here, but if I needed to, I can do that. I could do the same thing with this one here. And then, of course, this one makes an attack. Nimble escape, disengage. 5, 10. I'm now in the reach of the rogue. 15. Now in the reach of the ranger and the rogue and the fighter. And now I'm gonna move out of reach. That's 20, 25. So I moved out of reach, not of the fighter, but of the rogue and the ranger. They don't get to make an attack, unfortunately. Why? Because I used nimble escape. And with nimble escape, I can use a bonus action to disengage. So, yeah, opportunity attacks occur as many times as they have to. And there are lots of ways for some of your monsters, probably the most common monsters, to avoid being attacked in that way. So, yeah, you don't need to worry too much about that sort of thing, I would imagine. Hopefully that answered your question. I hope it did. And for those of you who have never heard of the Congo line, you now do. It's like, I'm going to dodge underneath your attacks and go right round you and then go and kill the wizard. I love playing wizards, but this is the risk you take when you play a wizard. How's it going, David Rose? How are you? Welcome. We've got quite a few people in here today, so yeah, I'll try to move a bit faster with these questions, shall I? Hopefully I've answered your question. If I remember correctly, what you aren't fond of online. Yeah, no, but see, again, you know, I use maps and miniatures even when I play online. Okay? Nacho man. Yeah, look, so for example, I ran Ravenloft as a one-shot for my group this weekend. I am not actually the dungeon master, but I said I'll run it as a one-shot. They're level 3. There are 5 of them, and they almost killed Strahd in the first round. They surprised him. I wasn't expecting it. They rolled higher than him, and bam, down he goes almost. I had to actually have him flee. That's a vampire. That's Strahd the vampire against level 3 characters. Okay? They can kick butt, player characters. They are very, very powerful. Jean, how are you? Do characters always have the hit dice equal to their level? Yes, they do. There are no exceptions, no. It's always equal to their level. The only time it'll be a bit weird is when you multi-class. So if you take, say, 3 levels in Monk and 2 levels in Wizard, I don't know why you would, but okay, you would get 2 of the Wizard's hit dice, which is a D6. So you have 2 D6s that you can spend, and the Monk, I think, is it a D8 or a D10? I can't remember. You would get the 3 hit dice for the Monk. Okay. So that means you got to spend. You decide which ones you spend first. It's always smart if you are multi-classing to spend the ones with the highest number first, rather than the lower number. Yep. I didn't know the hit dice work. That's a new thing to you. Well, good. I didn't realize that was new to you. Good news. That's right. So yeah, David Rose is correct. They are specific to your class. You're welcome, John, by the way. Okay, ugly weirdo. What do you got here? I like Fred, and so should you. He's trying to get people to press the like button if you haven't figured it out. Thank you, ugly weirdo. David Rose, as a DM who uses theatre of the mind, it's helpful if you if you tell a DM what you do and let them help you. I gotta put my glasses on. Where the heck are they? Sorry, people. Sometimes my eyes are all right, and sometimes they're not so great. Let's just make sure I get this sorted out though. Okay, that's better. As a DM, it's good if you tell DM what you want to do and let them help you make it happen. That's really, it's really, you do need to trust them. Yeah, being secretive at any time, whether you're using maps, dice, and miniatures or theatre of the mind, is never helpful. If you're playing in a game where it's like that, it's an unpleasant experience. You have to work on building trust. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Frankly, for me, I think the most important aspect of playing the game is always friendship and building trust. So building friendship, everything else, the rules, how the way you play your character, how the story works out, none of it is actually important. The only thing that's important is the integrity of the individuals playing the game. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. All you have is potentially a disaster waiting to hit a great huge brick wall. And they do come up. Beyond the screen, hello. Okay, so now that I've done that, I think maybe I'm going to take a short rest myself of 5 minutes, come back, and then explain some more mechanics. But before I do that, since there aren't any more questions in here, and if you don't ask me questions, then all I'm going to do is just demonstrate stuff to you that I think you might need. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. Hashtag please ask. If you can't write into the chat, it's because subscribers only can to answer. You need to be subscribed for at least 20 minutes to be able to use the live chat. Okay, please ask your questions. Now, if it wasn't obvious, I have answered any question. Didn't have to relate to the basic game mechanics. I'll answer all the questions. That's all fine. Right. So I'm going to put that in, and then I think what we'll do is we'll get Arnold Schwarzenegger to look after you for a little while, and I'll be back in about 5 minutes while I just take a quick break. roll back in here. Okay, almost back. Let's get myself into position. Get comfortable. Okay. Well, I think we're ready to come back. Let's bring it back and see what questions we have, eh? I'm sure I have lots and lots of new questions waiting for me. Hello, Fendar. How are you? Fendar is a patron, supports me on Patreon, and also a moderator. Thank you for coming today. It's been good to have you. Good time to show up. Hopefully you have some questions for me, people. David Rose. Yes. Dinomancer. Hello, Dinomancer. Dinomancer is also a patron, supports me on Patreon. Okay, your question. What do you got here? If a Battlemaster uses Commander's Strike on someone with Warcaster, would it be fine to allow them to use their reaction to cast a spell instead of an attack? Oh my god, Dinomancer. That's a hard question. I don't know. Would I even be able to answer a question as complicated as that in the middle of a live stream? I'm just trying to fathom if that's even going to be possible. I'd probably have to look at the actual ability itself and then try to remember all of your different bits and pieces that you've talked about. Battlemaster and is this going to work? Commander Strike. Well, I found the ability Commander Strike. So what is the actual question you have here for me, Dinomancer? If a Battlemaster uses Commander Strike on someone with a Warcaster, combined with Warcaster, yeah, would it be fine to allow them to use their reaction to cast a spell instead of an attack? Well, doesn't Warcaster, my understanding is that Warcaster allows you to use a spell as a, what the heck was it? I thought it was as an opportunity attack. Is that not part of the feature in the first place? I thought it was. That was my understanding. Maybe I haven't looked at that feat enough to be able to figure it out, but I'm pretty sure. The problem is with the game is that it's got a lot of different things that change. Like it's not like it's universal for everything. Like there's so many specific rules. Let's have a look if I can find both of these different features and see how they would combine. I'm working my way towards this. So I can, okay, so I got that bit. So we've got Fighter's Battlemaster and the Warcaster thing. All right, and then what was the other aspect of this? Your reaction to cast a spell instead of an attack. Okay, all right, let's pull this apart. Okay, I'm ready to take on your challenge. You weren't going to make it easy for me, were you? No. you know, let's make it as hard as we possibly can. Okay. Oh well. Let's make that happen. Let's see if we can actually do this. Like let's go over and have a look at this thing and see if it's going to work. So, Battlemaster, Commander Strike. When you take the attack action on your turn, you can forego one of your attacks and use a bonus action to direct one of your opponents, one of your champions to strike. Okay. When you do so, choose a friendly creature who can see or hear you and expend one superiority die. That creature can immediately use its reaction to make one melee attack, adding the superiority die to the attacker's damage roll. Oh, okay. All right. So that is... So you're not actually making the attack as the commander. Instead, it's one of your champions that are striking. And it's going to be one of your allies who can see or hear you. So you're giving them commands, and they get your superiority die to use. And they take a reaction. So they're taking their turn, taking their reaction on your turn. Okay. And they make one weapon attack. Well, it's specified a weapon attack. There's our first problem here, is if it says here, oh, get rid of you. It says one weapon attack. That there is a problem right there. We've almost, I think your concept has been squashed. Adding the superiority die to the attacker's damage roll. So I would say right now it looks like no. But let's look at Warcaster, because that might have specific rules as well, which is going to change things again. Warcaster. You have practice casting spells in the midst of battle, learning secret techniques that grant you the following benefits. You have advantage on a Constitution saving throw that where you have to make concentration checks. Doesn't apply in this situation. You can perform the somatic components of spells even when you have weapons or shields in both hands. Okay, now here's the last bit, because you're assuming that what the creature's doing is an opportunity attack, aren't you? Okay, when a hostile creature's movement provokes an opportunity attack, here's our problem, from you. So a hostile creature has to provoke an opportunity attack from you. You can use your reaction to cast a spell at the creature rather than make an opportunity attack. Right. The spell must have a casting time of 1 action and must target only that creature. So the requirement for Warcaster to do this reaction is it has to be you, and it has to be an opportunity attack. And what we're dealing with here is that reaction that the ally makes is not an opportunity attack, and it has to be a melee. It has to be a one weapon attack. A weapon specifies that you can it has to be a fist, or it has to be an actual weapon, say a sword or a mace or something like that. Okay, I think the answer is no. I don't think that it can be done. I think those two abilities have criteria within them that sort of eliminate that as an option, unfortunately. For those of you who are like, oh, it should be possible. No, I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. We'll see if time tells whether I believe I got that one right or not. But I think I've dissected it sufficiently. Okay, let's go back to the chat and see what we get. Now, if you were to home brew that or house rule it, you could house rule it. Okay, so what do you got here? Look, you don't have to think of a question for me. I'm happy. I would be happy just to demonstrate some stuff to people rather than answering these tricky questions. That one's most of the questions were actually being very, very easy, but that one was that was a hard question to figure out. How are you doing, Agile Monk? Agile Monk is a patron and also a moderator and supports me on Patreon. Welcome. It came up last night in our home game. Okay, the fighter uses an attack and its basic attack to command an ally to use his reaction to attack. Yeah. No, can't work that way, unfortunately. Needs to be a weapon attack, not a spell, and also it needs to be an opportunity attack, not just an attack that takes place on a reaction. Just because an attack occurs on a reaction does not mean it's an opportunity attack. I don't think it would be wrong to say yes to it, though, frankly. Okay. Right, so rules. Let me just work through here. I'm trying to look for actual questions. No. So David Rose, a melee attack. Okay, it says melee weapon attack. Does it say melee weapon attack? It says weapon attack. One weapon attack. It doesn't state that it's a melee attack. It states that it's a weapon attack, and that's where the problem lies ultimately. Okay, you can make a melee attack that is a melee spell attack, because there is such a thing. But if it stipulates that you have to make a weapon attack, then that kind of cancels out any chance of using a spell. Okay, if it had said that you get to make say one attack, then you could use a weapon, you could use a spell. It wouldn't matter, but you can't in that case. Okay, so let me just see if I can dissect this. Are we coming up with anything new that we need to deal with? Otherwise, I want to do some demonstration. Lots of opinions being thrown out there. Okay, different triggers. Okay, all right. Okay. We got through all that. So, for those of you who are in fact relatively new and need something that isn't quite so nuanced, let's just go through some basics here and see how we go. All right. I think that's a good start for today. So I'm going to get rid of all of these goblins because these goblins are just going to be a complete pain in the butt right now. And what I want to do is I actually want to demonstrate something relatively simple. How did I manage to lose one of my characters? Oops, that's because they're over here. Okay, so you might notice here that there is a well. Now, what if you wanted to climb down the well? Well, if they've got a rope, they could tie off the rope at the top of the well and just climb down. I wouldn't bother making a dice roll or any kind of check for something like that. That would be kind of pointless. Yeah, I wouldn't do something like that. That would be silly. But if we're dealing with somebody who doesn't use a rope and the surface of the well is quite difficult to navigate in terms of climbing, and it's maybe slippery and quite deep, where they could potentially fall in, or if they fall in, there's not actually that much water at the bottom, so if they fall in, they're going to hurt themselves. Falling into a well full of water is probably not going to be a big problem if it's got plenty of water at the bottom, but if it doesn't, okay, you might have to make a skill check or an ability check, athletics. I'm going to set the DC. Well, we're not going to bother with a 5 because 5 is very easy. Why would I bother rolling dice for that? I'm not going to use a 10 because that's easy. So I'm going to set it as a 15, as medium difficulty. So there's a chance of failure, and there's not enough water at the bottom to actually break their fall. So they're going to take, say, let's say it's 30 feet deep. So 30 feet deep in terms of a fall, with only a little bit of water at the bottom. For every 10 feet, it's going to be 6 points of also a D6. So I've got 3 D6 waiting for them. If they balls it up, that's what's the consequences. So what I'm going to do is we're going to make an athletics check or strength check. You can use either one. Frankly, I don't think it matters. In terms of the modifier I'm going to use, I'm going to get the fighter to clamber down there. We're going to get them to clamber down. This is the character here that I'm going to use to go down the well. And they have a modifier for their strength. Athletics is a +5. So 5. And I'm going to roll a 20-sided dice. I'm not going to give them advantage because nobody's helping them. Okay, they don't have a rope. Somebody was stupid enough to not bring the rope. They left it at home. Like, don't leave your rope at home, people. Okay, it's like leaving your car keys at home. And is it your wallets at home? You leave your wallets at home. You can't actually drive away from home unless you... Okay, anyway. Okay, so I rolled a 19. So 5 and 19 is 24. I needed to get equal to or greater than. I got greater than. I succeed in climbing down the well. And if I didn't succeed in climbing down the well, then of course the end result is I get to roll my six-sided dice, my 3 six-sided dice for the 30-foot fall. Okay, so that would be a good time to sort of put it into play. Now that could be done out of combat. A lot of these things that you're going to be doing are going to generally wind up being out of combat. Now you might be thinking, Fred, why didn't you make that a strength check? One of the problems you may or may not have noticed is that a lot of the game is tried to be built so it's backward compatible to a certain degree. So 5e is designed to be trying to be as backward compatible with some of the older adventures. And in the past, older versions of the game did not use the word athletics. They used strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Okay, and as long as you have that as your starting point, you can pretty much get away with everything. Now, with an athletics check, it's not just strength that's involved in climbing down a well. Okay, it's not just about your strength, it's about your skill at climbing. Like, do you know how to actually climb properly? There are some techniques to it. It is a perishable skill. So athletics is perfectly fine. You don't need to force them to make a strength check and not let them use athletics when they are actually trained and proficient in athletics. The same thing actually applies to lifting. If anybody's been ever been involved in any kind of weight training or powerlifting, you know that your strength, your muscles, your actual strength is not the only thing that's important. It's important to wear a safety belt around your waist to ensure that the lower muscles don't pop out, because they are often under a lot of stress, so you need to support the back. Okay, so the type of equipment you wear, but also they have a technique that they use to ensure they don't injure themselves. So when you're lifting something, I would fall back on, yes, we're using strength as the ability, but if they have athletics and they are trained in it and proficient, let them make the athletics check. That would be my advice to you with regard to dealing with an acrobatics or a skill check. Okay, did I get through different triggers, blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay. That's actually a good question. Let's come back to my webcam on my face for that one. I think that's actually probably more suitable as not a demonstration thing. Yeah, no, I should have said one weapon attack. I shouldn't have said melee. It was one weapon attack in the wording. It's one weapon attack. My mistake. Okay, so but in any case, yeah, we're all good. Okay, so Ugly Weirdo, you have a question here. Let's deal with your question. How would you suggest dealing with a DM making an unreasonable ruling, like, say, not letting Warcaster grant the ability to cast a spell as an opportunity attack? Okay, Ugly Weirdo. So you basically mean that, well, look, I got Warcaster up. So let's go to a screen that actually deals with that. Let's deal with it that way. I think that's probably the best way, is to just look at the thing. So it's the last bullet point on Warcaster, and it says when a hostile creature's move provokes an opportunity attack from you, you can use your reaction to cast a spell at the creature, rather than making an opportunity attack. Okay. So an opportunity attack is normally made with some sort of, I believe it is a melee attack. That's right, it has to be a melee attack. Okay. The spell must have a casting time of one action and must target only that creature. So if you're taking Warcaster and they're not letting you use that feature, I mean, frankly, I would say, look, can I, if Warcaster isn't actually used the way, because that's one of the main reasons for taking Warcaster, and Dungeon Masters are allowed to modify and change the game if they want to. I just say, look, I just don't feel like Warcaster is going to be much point in actually having it because I can't use it that way. So can I just remove that and take a different feat? I think that's the conversation you have. Also, too, I would say to you as a Dungeon Master, if you are not going to let somebody use a particular feature a particular way as written, you probably do want to let them know in advance. And you know, I mean, why are you even letting? You should have just said, I don't allow the Warcaster feat in my game. I mean, I tell my players that we're not using the grappler feat in my game. Like, I've told them already, like, we're not using the grappler feat. It's just not available. Okay, and they're like, okay, all right. And we've had discussions about, you know, what if we want to take it? And I've already told them how I will roll on grappling as it is and pinning somebody, because I believe all characters should be able to not just grapple but also try to pin somebody. Frankly, I think it should be a feature that a monk does really well, and it's not part of the monk without having to spend key. So yeah, I would say that's probably the smartest way to go. Look, I've played in many games for years where I had dungeon masters who would make calls that I didn't agree with or were slightly different to how the rules were, and I had to suck it up. I have to admit that there was a point where I lost my patience with a lot of that sort of thing, And so your choice is, if you don't want to keep playing that kind of game, then you go somewhere else if you can find another game, that is. I mean, I had to stay with the same dungeon masters when they were making calls that I didn't like for years because there was nowhere else to go. And I know a lot of people say, it's better to play no Dungeons and Dragons than to play bad Dungeons and Dragons. And I disagree. I having lived in New Zealand and with all of our whole community for years and years being underground, and there was not a lot of online play when I was growing up, I can tell you now, in fact, it's only really a new thing. I can tell you now that if I had the choice between no Dungeons and Dragons and having people make rulings on stuff that I didn't like, or just not playing the game, I would have always gone with play the game, even though it's not played run the way I was hoping it would be played. Why is that? Because I got other stuff out of it. And I mean, my view, I know I run a channel about rules. This whole live stream is about rules. Fuck the rules. I don't care about the rules. Even when I play a character, even when I'm playing as a dungeon master, I really don't care. Okay? I mean, I will explain stuff, I would demonstrate it, but ultimately I don't really care that much. That doesn't mean that I'm a narrative dungeon master. That doesn't mean that I don't care about the rules. I just don't know that the importance of it, I think, is always that, at the top of the list. You know what I mean? So even as a player, you kind of have to build a bit of a spine. You know what I mean? I think a few people who are playing the game right now are kind of a bit spineless. Like they haven't had to deal with not being able to play the game. There were years when I had the books, but I could not find anybody to play with. And then finally when I got to play the game, even though I didn't agree with a lot of the stuff that was going on, or I didn't even understand what was going on, frankly, because it was kind of new to me, I would have preferred to play the game than to have not played the game, even if I disagreed with what the Dungeon Master says. Now, my home group, every Dungeon Master in that group, and we're all Dungeon Masters, almost all of us, we all run the game differently. So that means I have to deal with different calls and rulings every single time one of us picks up the mantle. And because everybody's doing it differently. Like it's grow a skin time. A thicker skin than you had before. Anyway. I'm hoping that answered the question. I am not trying to be rough about your question at all. I'm just saying, sometimes that's the only answer. Okay, so where are we? Him to over it. So moving past all that. That holds his actions. I don't know. I don't know where we are at, people. I'm a little bit gone. Oh, ugly weirdo! You were joking. Well, I answered the question, didn't I? I did answer the question. Okay. All right. Let's have a look. See if we can get time in to shovel in another of these mechanics before we run out of time. It was awesome. Hello, Seeker. How are you? Rule disagreements. So if you haven't figured out, I don't really do videos on rules disagreements on my channel. Why? Because it's tabloid news, tabloid magazine bollocks. It's the lowest form of YouTube content. It is it is not. It splits the community. It sets up bad relationships and helps feed bad relationships between dungeon masters and players, which is why I don't talk about that sort of thing, because it is all about communication. Ultimately, everything is about communication, and there isn't much more to say. Communication, getting to know people, it's about actually becoming friends. And have you not had friends where they have done things and said things that you didn't like? I know I have. Okay? Even some of my best friends, we do not always agree. Sometimes our views are very different. And that is all right. We are allowed to have different views. Okay, Dinomancer, what do you got here? What can we do for a player who has a lot of trouble in quantifying the story, lore, content, and basic session by session goes on? We do weekly recaps and get him involved as much as each takes turn. Okay, so Dinomancer, you're talking about trying to get somebody to be involved more in the game than they are with regard to, like, how do you get a player to be involved with the story more, with the lore more, with the content, and every other aspect, and sort of try to remember stuff, okay? And then, of course, like making sure they take their turn at the right time. Can I just say you've just asked a question that is way too big for the next 17 minutes. I could not answer all of that, Dinomancer, not in just that short period of time. What I will say is this. Players put into the game as much as they feel like they want to or need to. And to change somebody's view of how they do that, you either have to tell them, look, can you do this more or that more? And if they say no, or they don't do it, or they say, screw you, I'm going somewhere else, that's what's going to happen. I mean, you can't control other people. I mean, that's why I keep saying your whole process is to try to become friends. That's why you have to talk. You have to talk about stuff outside of Dungeons and Dragons, off topic, before the game. Like my home group, we talk for 15 to 30 minutes before we even start, and we only play for like 3 hours, which is actually 2.5 hours. And we also take a 10-minute break, sometimes 15 if somebody has to go and pick up food. So it's actually only 2 hours and 15 minutes we actually play the game. And all the rest is talking about other stuff, like what happened at work, and what movies we like, or books we like, or about history, or just cracking jokes, or being silly buggers. Like, that's what we do. How's it going, Victor? When do you tell a character to roll for investigation rather than perception? Usually I start with perception, and usually investigation, I get them to roll for investigation if it requires Sherlock Holmes-like investigation skills, like deduction. Do I need to take the information that I've seen, heard, or smelt and put it together and come to a conclusion? That's when I would usually roll investigation, or get them to roll investigation. It is essentially the next step. There are times when you don't even need to roll for perception because the information is obvious. You can actually, it's all laid out for you. The blood splatters there, the body's over there, the knife's there. So you see all the information. It's trying to figure out what took place for that murder. That's when the investigation comes into place. That's the deduction. Does that make sense? Okay, ninja, spy, alchemist. The importance of not staying in a tavern too long at the beginning of the game. So players will stay in a tavern for as long as they want. If you want them to get out of the tavern faster, okay, have a bar fight. If you need something to happen, have a bar fight. It's one of the most common things that people do in games. As a dungeon master, it's a tool. I know it is cliche. I know it is cheap, but it keeps players happy, okay? And it will cause chaos, absolutely. But we're here for chaos. Everybody's trying to blow off steam after going to school and work, and sometimes we need to have a bar brawl. Otherwise, burn down that tavern, baby, and then have them put it out. I like blowing up taverns. If Lethal Weapon, if anything, Lethal Weapon and Mel Gibson and Danny Glover, is it Danny Glover? It's Glover, have taught me that when you start anything, even James Bond movies, blow shit up, okay? And taverns are ripe for the picking. Yeah, bar on fire, tavern's going to burn. Okay, so Victor, what do you got here? When you have a PC make an intelligence check on a specific subject, is the result used for the rest of the PC's life, or do they sometimes forget and remember things about the subject? OP made sense. Okay, all right, Victor, it's a good question. Okay, so I will answer your question. So this is how I see it. You don't have to do it this way. This is how I saw a lot of other dungeon masters who sort of taught me stuff, some of which taught me stuff or did things the way I did not like, but this is one thing I've picked up and I like, and I think it's a good idea. Say your character is level 1, and you make an intelligence check for, say, a topic like Arcana, and you get a result for that specific situation on that particular topic. So I'm trying to remember information about trolls and how trolls operate, and Arcana seemed like an appropriate check for that. And I don't get a particularly good roll, but I am proficient. I usually treat their check for Arcana or Intelligence in this situation as never going to be less than a 10. They always know common information. 10 is easy information, okay? So what they were aiming for was something better than a 10, as far as I'm concerned. So the dice roll is just to see if they get beyond 10, rather than just the standard flat floor that I've set. Now, if somebody's not trained in Arcana, then there's no guarantee that they will know anything about that troll when they make that check or intelligence check. And this could be around a specific object, a magical item or whatever object it is you're dealing with, right? But then they go to level 2 and they come across trolls again, or they want to make another knowledge check about trolls, but you said, no, you've already made one when you were level 1. Well, level 2, they should have gotten better. They should have learned more stuff. I am open and happy for them when they gain another level to actually make another attempt at we're figuring out if the puddle of blood on the floor is troll blood. And they're making an Arcana check. Now, they made one when they were level 1, but they can make one at level 2 for me, as far as I'm concerned. I know some people only let them do it when their proficiency bonus goes up, or their, in this case, their ability modifier goes up. But I feel like every level they go up, another opportunity for them to make another dice roll on the same topic, under the same, with the same conditions. So at level 3, they could do, pile of blood, troll blood. What do I know about troll blood? Make another check. Do you know what I mean? So it is a very personal thing, the way that you apply the game. All I'm doing in this is showing you the basics. At some point, you as a dungeon master have to take ownership of the rules. You need to explain to your players who are playing characters that you are taking ownership of the rules and applying it in a way that makes sense for the world and their characters and your monsters and your mind. Yep. Because Wizards of the Coast can't do that for you. That's why we have a dungeon master. Otherwise, they could just go play video game. Okay. I think I answered your question, Victor. Okay, so what do we got here? That puts it into context. That makes sense for me. Thank you. I'm glad it made sense to you. If it made sense, if it didn't make sense to anybody who listened to what I just said, that's all right. Then don't do it that way. I always had a hard time wrapping my head around that. Yeah, no, I totally get it. When I saw what one of my old friends who was dungeon mastering was doing, and he explained why he did it this way, and I was like, that actually makes sense. I get it. Dynamancer, we give him much agency within the game. He asks for advice a lot. The question is more like, how can we help him understand collective storytelling? I guess the only thing you can do with people who play Dungeons and Dragons and they don't understand that you're playing it's collective storytelling is you need to tell them that, one, the game they're playing is not a game of skill. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but Dungeons and Dragons revolves around rolling this thing. It's a 20-sided dice. It's a random game, okay? Now, you can calculate probabilities, yes, but so can gamblers. So Dungeons and Dragons is a story game with a gambling component to it, which is the dice roll. That's what it is. So your decisions as a player don't even have to have, no matter how good your choices are, If the dice don't roll what you need it to roll, your actions mean nothing unless the dungeon master says, I am not going to roll dice for this. So what you've got to consider this game is it's not like playing Monopoly. It's not playing chess. I mean, that's why I use the meme chess, okay, quite often. You're not playing a game of skill. It's not chess, okay? It's a gambling game, and it has a story attached to it. And frankly, you don't need the rules to play the game. You don't even need dice to play Dungeons and Dragons. I know a lot of people struggle with that concept, but if you actually look at the definition of a game, it has nothing to do with rules. There's nothing there that says that games have rules. Games are just games. Kids understand this. Adults have no understanding of this. They actually don't get it at all. And I think part of the reason is for us to legitimize the fact that we are playing a game like this as an adult. We have to say there are rules and we roll dice, and that's what makes Dungeons and Dragons, because we could never tell somebody honestly to their face, because we would be so scared to do so, that we just like hanging out and playing together. And, instead of playing cops and robbers and doctors and nurses or cowboys and Indians, now we want to play Dungeons and Dragons and be heroes and fight monsters. That's essentially what it is. Kids understand it. Adults are terrified of the fact that if they don't put rules in place and say that there are dice mechanics that are really important, that frankly they will be considered childish. And many of us have to deal with people who tell us that us playing Dungeons and Dragons is a childish thing and we should put it down. Okay? And go and do something with our life, because adults don't play a child's game. That's really what you're dealing with right there. Yeah. So it's team sport. You're playing together. When you play a team sport, you have to work together. That means you have to come to some sort of compromise. You don't have to agree with everything that gets done at the table. You just have to. That compromise is a big part of team sports. Yep, and that's what you're playing. Is Dungeons and Dragons is a gambling team sport. Okay, right, next. What about insight? When do you tell a player to roll for insight, and what kind of information do you tell them on a social interaction? We're going to run out of time, but I'm going to answer your question. Okay, so this is a tough one. Insight is one of those things that is awkward. So I would get them to make a dice roll for insight when I think there's information that they might pick up. Now, what are they picking up? If they think that somebody is deceiving them, then there might be telltale signs. Body communication is not just, or communication is not just what you say, it's how you portray yourself. So how do you do that? Body language. So are they sweating? Are they looking down? Are they looking away in different directions? That's what insight's doing for you. Are they fidgeting? Those are the signs that you're going to communicate to them. You don't tell them when they're trying to figure out if somebody's lying to them and being deceptive. You don't tell them, oh, they're lying. You say, they're sweating. Their face is red. Their sweat is pulling on their chin. Their eyes are darting around. They are fidgeting. You give them all of the signs that we understand as body language that communicates different information. And then how they use that information is up to them. You haven't actually told them that they're dealing with a character or a monster that is lying to them. What you've done is given them the signs. People understand this. I know people say, oh, I don't understand body language. No, everybody does. Okay, you do it all day long. So that's what I would say. Do you know what I mean? That's probably the best way to look at it. And I only get them to roll it when I think that there's something that they could pick up on. Yep. And that's the body language side of things. Insight. Okay, that puts it in there. You like that answer, Fender? Good. Well said. Okay, ugly weirdo, I'm glad that made sense. I had this conversation the other day about childlike things. What are we teaching kids if adults are ashamed of being childlike? Exactly. If we want kids to not be ashamed of being themselves. So, I'm going to have to go in a second, but I'm going to say it right now. I believe that children should be playing Dungeons and Dragons because they want to, but the game is too complicated. So the game has to be simpler. That doesn't mean it has to be the game that you play as an adult, but there needs to be some version of it for them that is very similar in mechanically. Like, essentially a kid of 5 years old can understand I roll a 20-sided dice, when I need to do something for an ability check, a skill check, an attack roll, or a saving throw. They can understand that. They'll get that. It won't take that long. They'll figure that out. That's all they need for Dungeons and Dragons. Yep. Things like opportunity attacks and short rests and long rests and special abilities that classes have, none of that means anything, and it's really not that important for a child. But we need that. So that's their first game, and I've said this before, we need 3 games. For the child, for the 12-year-old and up, okay, that's the standard game that most of us play, and then the advanced game, which is basically something that has a whole lot of ported over variant rules that somebody uses at their table. And everybody, the advanced rules will be different for everybody. They'll do their own thing. That's what we're aiming for. Okay, I think we are done for today, people. I have to go. And I need to run too, because I have to go to work. I've got a job. I have to do stuff. Anyway, a good conversation. We got a lot done today. So I just want to say thank you to my patrons for supporting me to make sure I can keep running this class. This is a weekly class, obviously. And I want to thank everybody in the chat for providing their questions and their feedback, and for watching. Don't feel bad if I missed your question. I've done my best with what I had. Now, thank you for watching all of the replays, the live streams, and my edited videos. I appreciate that as well. And wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.